Hello, a few technical issues here, and welcome to our Q&A session today, which is on deposit returns. So it's me, Sally and Leanne who's here today, and we are going to talk about all things deposit related. First and foremost, deposits now in Scotland need to be lodged. So this has been ongoing for almost 10 years now, in fact a little bit over 10 years I think. And deposits need to be lodged with one of the 3 deposit schemes which are up and running in Scotland. These deposit schemes are free to lodge with. There is quite a process to doing it, however they don't actually cost any money. And there are 3 up and running. We use Safe Deposit Scotland. There's also a couple of other ones, and any and all do the same job. So within 30 working days of taking that deposit from a tenant, you need to lodge it with the deposit scheme. And it's really important that you, when you lodge it with the deposit scheme, that you follow through with all the relevant paperwork and issue that to the tenant. If you get this wrong, there is a fine which may be applied to the landlord. And that fine can be up to 3 times the deposit. So it's really important that you lodge the deposit. So once that deposit is lodged with one of the schemes, it stays there throughout the duration of the tenancy, and at the end of the tenancy, then there's a process to go through to recover that deposit. Now, while that deposit is lodged with the deposit scheme, you cannot touch it. The landlord can't touch it, tenant can't touch it, agent can't touch it. At the end of the tenancy, the process is done online, and you basically have to come to an agreement. If you don't come to an agreement with the tenant with regards to any deductions that you as the landlord would want to make, then the adjudication process starts there. And it can be a really long process. We've seen ones take up to 3 months?
Yeah, over 3 months.
Over 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's a really long process. So the key to a quick deposit return is to get agreement with the tenant, which sounds easy in theory, but is not always that easy in practice. So once you get agreement from both parties, then the release of the deposit is done within 5 working days. If you don't have agreement, there's lots and lots of different time frames for submitting evidence and the adjudicator looking at it, and then there's an appeal process. So the whole thing can take up to 3, I think it's even been 4 months in one case. Anyway, the purpose of today's Q&A session is really to focus on what's fair to deduct from a tenant's deposit, and in different scenarios how we as an agent look at them. Probably as an agent, this is one of the most difficult aspects of our job, because we're always the middleman, so we're always trying to come to a fair agreement between the landlord and the tenant. And while we can give our opinion and we can give advice to landlords, they don't always follow it. And I think it's fair to say that all parties always have a different opinion on the deposit return. It's definitely probably the most difficult part of our job, trying to keep everybody happy. And we do genuinely try to keep everybody happy, but as you would expect, it's a difficult job. So deposit returns, when it comes to the deposit return at the end, we as the agent, and we would always recommend to any landlord to go to the property at the end of the tenancy and do what we call a checkout. So it's a walkthrough of the property, where you're comparing, hopefully you've done a check-in report, where you're comparing how that property was when the tenant moved in to how that property is when the tenant is moving out. And if there are changes in the condition of that property, how what's fair to charge, and what's something that the tenant should be taking responsibility for, and what should the landlord be taking responsibility for. With most things that relate to deposit, it's definitely important that we look at the whole tenancy, the tenancy as a whole, and we don't just focus on one aspect of it, and that we look at the duration of the tenancy, what's happened while they've been in there, as to what we feel is acceptable to try to hold the tenant responsible for. So a couple of questions have come up. And the first question that's come up is with regards to blue tack. This is a really common one that we get.
Yeah.
So particularly for us, because we deal with lots of student properties, a lot of them do use blue tack. So this particular question is the tenant in 2 of the bedrooms, the tenant has used blue tack, and this landlord would like to charge for redecoration of that of 2 of those rooms. Would that be something that we would recommend?
Well, yes, it's certainly something that we can successfully make a claim on. There are various factors that we have to consider before approaching the tenant and landlord with a suggestion to that. One being the length of tenancy and the condition of the walls at the time the tenancy began. So with every checkout, it's very important that any checkout is as good as the inventory that it starts off with. So for example, if the tenant moves in and the walls are pristine, they have been freshly painted, there's absolutely no marks or any damages to the walls at all, that obviously strengthens the case. Then you have to look at the length of the tenancy. So if a tenant's been in there for say 2 years, we have a lifespan for every item, or appliances, redecoration, etc. And these lifespans are presented to us by the deposit scheme. So we try and follow this as strictly as possible. And
these are like their guidelines, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And we do have to be realistic, and people forget sometimes that these you have to consider fair wear and tear. So to simplify it, in a situation where the walls are undamaged at the beginning of the tenancy, the lifespan for those rooms would be say 4 years, and if they've been there for 2 years, it's very simply 50%. So we would be suggesting that the tenant would cover 50%.
So there's a quote for the redecoration works, and then we would propose to charge the tenant 50% of that.
50% of that, if it warranted it. If there's say 4 marks on the wall, it may not warrant a full redecoration, so it may be seen as unfair. You have to weigh up whether or not that would be feasible. If it was a situation where the walls had, various marks and pinholes, etc. over it, you would be thinking, well, it wasn't great at the start. Maybe offer at this stage a compensation request, a contribution which says maybe £30 or £40 to contribute to that. But if it's over 5 years or so, then we would be recommending to the landlord that the place be redecorated in any case.
Okay. Next question is with regards to smoking. This is a really common one, and this kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with the old pet scenario that we have in properties. Yeah. So smoking, this landlord says the tenant's been smoking in the property, it smells, it's discoloured, the walls, and she has known that they've been smoking throughout the duration of the tenancy and requesting that they stop. However, they've obviously not done that.
They've not done that. Well, if you have an agent, hopefully the agent has been keeping a good record of these facts. So at your periodical inspections, you try and highlight things such as maybe an ashtray or lighters or things like that, any evidence that you can. All the inspections are there to strengthen the claim, and they do a great job in doing so, and there should be a very specific clause in the lease agreement to state that the tenant cannot smoke in the property. So all this will strengthen the claim. When it comes to the actual deposit side and making a fair and reasonable claim, what we try and do is work on a process of elimination. So we would probably start off with shampooing and deodorising any of the soft furnishings. So that could be the carpets, curtains, sofa, cushions. After the property has been cleaned, we will reassess it. If the smell, whether it be from pets, smoking, if it's still an issue, we would then look to possibly carry out some redecoration. However, we wouldn't go to redecorate the entire room, maybe start off with a ceiling or a feature wall, because you do have to bear in mind as well that you may have a deposit of £450 and it won't stretch, it won't cover all of this work.
Really quickly,
and we can't exceed what we have, because then the landlord is going to be responsible. So we try and keep it within the limitations, and to make sure that the problem has been resolved fairly.
Yeah.
But we can certainly win those very successfully with the correct evidence.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, that we mention here about the leases. Clauses in the lease are absolutely fundamental to winning any deposit disputes that come up. So things like smoking, pets, these clauses must be in the lease agreement, or you are going to be on a sticky wicket if you try and make a claim against them. Last question, and this is one of our most common ones, is about grouting and sealant around the shower. So tenant been in the property and they have returned the property with manky grouting and black sealant all around the base of the shower. Can the landlord make a claim for that?
Yes, again, we can very successfully make a claim for that. The inventory is the most important document, we cannot stress that enough. If we have that inventory that states that the sealant and the grout was in pristine condition at the time the tenant moved in, and that backed up with an invoice from a contractor who may have just recently replaced, that again is very, very strong. We look at the inspection reports again. We can raise points on the tenant's housekeeping. If that is not to the best standard, we again can show.
So basically they're not cleaning the shower properly?
They're not cleaning it properly. Obviously fair wear and tear is expected, sorry. However, if the area has been dried and cleaned and maintained properly, it shouldn't be happening. So you have to look over the period. We have tenancies that begin and last up to 6 months, and it's completely deteriorated. So that's not acceptable. But a tenancy, say after 5 years, you would be expecting that to get replaced.
And things now are deemed consumables, things like shower curtains and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
The rulings on that have changed, I believe, recently. And
oh yeah, the adjudicators. We have recently had a meeting with one of the adjudicators for Safe Deposit Scotland, and they had said things like light bulbs, even though we do win claims for light bulbs, they believe light bulbs, mattress protectors, shower curtains, they see these items as consumables, and they expect the landlord to cover the cost of these things.
Okay. I guess like all of this has evolved over time, and it continues to evolve actually, doesn't it? Depending on different cases that come up. So it's a real learning process for us here in the office, and probably for all landlords about the place, and tenants as well, because tenants are definitely getting much more aware of making sure that their paperwork is up to scratch, and making sure that they're checking on things when they move into the property, which is great because it increases the standard, and it really helps to alleviate any issues that come up at the end of the tenancy.
Absolutely. It's so important to get off on the right foot at the start of the tenancy. If the tenant has raised any concerns in regards to cleanliness or damages, it is very, very important to highlight it and resolve that at that point. If it's left unresolved, that will create problems for you when you go to make a claim. Sometimes there are issues raised at the beginning of the tenancy, and you can't come to an agreement. Perhaps it's someone thinks something is clean, another person disagrees.
Cleaning is 100% the most
One idea of someone's idea of cleanness is not another person's, and so on and so forth. It's a very common issue. But you have to follow that up, even if it's with an email, or to say, as a landlord, I went out and I inspected it. In my opinion, I think it's fine. Take photographs all the time and just record everything that you do, and that will put you in good stead for the claim at the end of the tenancy.
Okay, great. Right, hopefully that has been useful to everybody. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.